The setting sun and the shadows of power. The city pulsed with energy as the day began its slow descent into evening. Under the golden hues of the setting sun, the streets were alive with the sound of bustling footsteps, snippets of conversation, and the occasional honk of impatient drivers navigating the labyrinth of urban life. A soft breeze carried the aroma of street food mixed with the faint tang of the nearby river, offering an atmosphere both comforting and chaotic. Maya Bennett sat alone on a weathered wooden bench tucked into a quiet corner of the city park. Her posture was relaxed, her demeanor unassuming. Clad in simple jeans and a slightly oversized hoodie, she could have been mistaken for just another resident enjoying a rare moment of peace. Few would guess that this unpretentious woman was Maya Bennett, the founder and CEO of a multimillion-dollar tech empire. Her rise had been meteoric, fueled by grit, intelligence, and an unrelenting spirit born of hardship. From a childhood spent in one of the city's most neglected neighborhoods to gracing the covers of influential business magazines, Maya's journey was the stuff of inspiration. Yet, in this moment, she craved anonymity. She watched the world pass by, a young couple laughing as they shared ice cream, a street musician coaxing hauntingly beautiful notes from his violin, and a child chasing after a bright red balloon. For Maya, these simple sights were grounding, reminding her of the beauty in ordinary moments. Her reverie was interrupted by the sudden, heavy clack of boots against the pavement. She turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she spotted a figure approaching. The man's silhouette was instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with the area. Officer Trent Hale was infamous in the city, a symbol of authority gone awry. His reputation was built on stories of unnecessary force, racial profiling, and a penchant for using his badge as a shield for his unchecked aggression. Maya felt a wave of unease but remained composed, her gaze shifting back to the horizon. "Evening," Hale said, his voice carrying a sharp edge as he stopped a few feet away. His uniform, while crisp, seemed to wear the arrogance of its owner like a badge of honor. "Evening," Maya replied evenly, refusing to meet his gaze. Hale's smirk widened, a predator sensing weakness. "Do you think this is where you belong?" Maya turned her head slowly to face him. Her expression was calm, her voice steady. "I'm sitting in a public park." "Is that a problem, officer?" Hale's eyes roved over her, his disdain palpable. "This is a respectable neighborhood," he said, his words dripping with unspoken prejudice. "Not a place for people like you." Maya's heart quickened, but she maintained her composure. She had faced men like Hale before, men who couldn't see past their biases, men who wielded power like a weapon. "I'm not breaking any laws," she said firmly. "And I'm not going anywhere." Hale's expression darkened. He stepped closer, his imposing frame looming over her. "Around here," he said, his voice lowering to a menacing growl, "I decide what's right and wrong." Maya straightened her back, meeting his gaze with unflinching resolve. "I know my rights," she said. "And you're out of line." The tension between them crackled like static electricity. Hale's jaw tightened as he weighed his next move. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed her arm, yanking her roughly to her feet. The force of it made her stumble, but she quickly steadied herself, glaring at him with a mixture of anger and defiance. "Let go of me," she demanded, her voice strong despite the tremor in her chest. "Or what?" Hale sneered, his grip tightening. "You think anyone here is going to stand up for you?" Before Maya could respond, a voice rang out, cutting through the tension like a blade. "That's enough. Let her go." Both Maya and Hale turned toward the source of the voice. A man emerged from the crowd, his tall figure outlined against the fading light. He was dressed in a dark trench coat, his stance relaxed but commanding. Hale bristled, momentarily loosening his grip on Maya. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped. The man's expression remained calm, almost disinterested. "Just someone who doesn't tolerate bullies in uniform," he said. Hale's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he quickly masked it with bravado. "Stay out of this. It's police business." From where I'm standing, the man replied, his voice steady, it looks more like harassment. The air grew thick with tension. For a moment, it seemed as though Hale might escalate the situation further. But under the stranger's unwavering gaze, his bravado faltered. With a sneer, he released Maya and took a step back. "You'll regret this," Hale muttered, his tone low and threatening. Without another word, he turned and stalked off, his boots echoing against the pavement as he retreated toward his patrol car. Maya exhaled deeply, the adrenaline coursing through her veins beginning to subside. She turned to her unexpected ally, her expression a mix of gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you," she said, brushing off her sleeves. The man nodded, his stern expression softening slightly. "Are you all right?" "I'll be fine," Maya replied, her voice steady but laced with emotion. The man offered a faint smile. "You shouldn't have to deal with that." "No one should." He turned to leave, but Maya called after him. "Wait. What's your name?" He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Call me Adam," he said simply before disappearing into the crowd. As Maya stood there, the weight of the encounter settled over her. She didn't know who Adam was or why he had intervened, but one thing was certain, this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Shadows of Truth. The following morning, the city awoke to its usual rhythm, honking cars, hurried commuters, and the muffled roar of life unfolding in every corner. Maya, however, sat at her kitchen table, staring into her untouched cup of coffee. The events of the previous evening played on a loop in her mind, each moment vivid and unshakable. She had faced prejudice before, more times than she cared to count. Growing up in a neighborhood riddled with neglect and systemic oppression, she'd learned early on how to navigate the invisible barriers society erected for people like her. But something about last night felt different. It wasn't just Hale's overt abuse of power, it was the sudden appearance of Adam, the mysterious man whose calm authority had diffused the situation. Who was he? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. Maya glanced at the screen, an email from her assistant. The subject line read, "Urgent, meeting with investors confirmed for Friday." She groaned inwardly. The world of high-stakes business rarely allowed room for personal reflection. With a deep breath, she rose from her seat and prepared to dive into her day. Yet, as she stepped into the shower and let the warm water wash over her, the knot of unease in her stomach refused to dissolve. Hours later, Maya's day was in full swing. She was seated in a sleek conference room on the 30th floor of a towering glass building, surrounded by her team. The meeting was focused on the launch of a groundbreaking app her company had been developing, a platform designed to connect underserved communities with critical resources, from job opportunities to legal aid. As her chief technology officer presented the latest updates, Maya's mind drifted momentarily. She thought about how far she had come. This project was personal, a way to give back to the very communities that had shaped her resilience. But she couldn't shake the lingering feeling of vulnerability from the previous night's encounter. When the meeting concluded, her team dispersed, leaving her alone in the room. She pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done in years. She searched for the name Officer Trent Hale. The results were both unsurprising and deeply troubling. Article after article chronicled allegations of misconduct, harassment, excessive force, and discriminatory behavior. Yet, each case seemed to fade into obscurity, buried under bureaucratic red tape. Hale remained on the force, his badge intact. Maya frowned. The system was broken, and Hale was a symptom of a much larger disease. Later that evening, Maya decided to visit her childhood neighborhood. It was a place she rarely went anymore, but tonight, she felt compelled. As her car wound through the familiar streets, memories surfaced, some fond, others painful. The corner store where she used to buy candy was now a boarded-up relic. The park where she played as a child was overgrown, its playground rusted and forgotten. She parked her car near the community center, a building that had once been a beacon of hope. Stepping out, she was greeted by a group of kids playing basketball on a cracked asphalt court. Their laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the surroundings. "Miss Bennet." She turned to see Mrs. Graham, a kind elderly woman who had been a fixture in the neighborhood for decades. "Maya, dear, it's so good to see you," Mrs. Graham said, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "It's good to see you too," Maya replied, hugging her tightly. They spent the next half hour catching up. Mrs. Graham spoke of the neighborhood struggles, rising crime, dwindling resources, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness. Maya listened intently, her resolve strengthening with each word. As they talked, Mrs. Graham leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That officer, Hale, he's been causing trouble around here for years. People are scared to speak up, but we all know what he's about." Maya nodded, her jaw tightening. She hadn't told anyone about her encounter with Hale, but hearing Mrs. Graham confirm what she already knew only deepened her conviction. "Thank you for telling me," Maya said. "I'll make sure his actions don't go unnoticed." Mrs. Graham's eyes widened. "Be careful, Maya. Men like him, they don't take kindly to being challenged." Maya placed a reassuring hand on the older woman's arm. "I've faced worse," she said softly. Later that night, back in her penthouse apartment, Maya paced her living room, her thoughts racing. She wasn't one to shy away from a fight, but she knew this wasn't a battle she could win alone. Her thoughts returned to Adam. He had intervened so decisively, as though he had seen men like Hale 100 times before. Who was he, really? Why had he chosen that moment to step in? Unable to resist, she opened her laptop and began searching for any trace of him. The name Adam was too vague, but she focused on the details she remembered: the trench coat, his commanding presence, his familiarity with confrontation. After hours of searching, she stumbled upon a forum dedicated to community activism. A post caught her eye. "If you've been wronged and no one will listen, Adam might. But he doesn't work for money or fame. He works for justice." The post included no further information, no last name, no contact details, just a cryptic message: "He'll find you when the time is right." Maya leaned back in her chair, frustration mixing with curiosity. She was determined to find him, but she also knew her own path forward couldn't rely on chance encounters. If Adam wouldn't reveal himself, she would have to take action on her own. In the days that followed, Maya reached out to her network, quietly gathering evidence against Hale. Through her connections, she uncovered footage from local security cameras showing his confrontations with other innocent people, patterns of abuse that painted a damning picture. Simultaneously, she began leveraging her company's platform to spotlight systemic issues in policing. Articles, testimonials, and data-driven reports flooded her website, sparking conversations and drawing attention to the inequalities that had plagued her community for decades. The momentum was building, but Maya knew she was walking a fine line. Publicly challenging someone like Hale was dangerous. She needed a strategy, and she needed allies. One evening, as she reviewed the footage she had collected, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello." A familiar voice replied, calm and measured. "Maya. It's Adam." Her heart skipped a beat. "How did you?" "We need to talk," he said, cutting her off. "Face to face. Tomorrow night. There's a cafe on 9th and Willow. Be there at 8 p.m. Before she could respond, the line went dead. Maya stared at her phone, a mix of apprehension and determination washing over her. She didn't know what Adam wanted or how he had found her, but she knew one thing for certain: this was no coincidence. A meeting in the shadows. The next evening, the city was cloaked in the dim haze of twilight as Maya made her way to the cafe on 9th and Willow. It wasn't the sort of place she usually frequented, small, unassuming, and tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The sign above the door flickered intermittently, casting uneven light onto the cracked pavement below. As she stepped inside, the scent of strong coffee and aged wood enveloped her. The cafe was sparsely populated, its patrons hunched over steaming cups or absorbed in their laptops. A faint jazz melody hummed through the speakers, adding a touch of warmth to the otherwise muted ambience. Maya scanned the room until her eyes landed on a figure seated in the farthest corner. Adam was waiting for her, his dark trench coat draped over the back of his chair. He sat with the same air of quiet authority she had witnessed during their first encounter, his expression unreadable as he stirred a cup of tea. Taking a deep breath, Maya approached and slid into the seat across from him. "You're a hard man to find," she said, her tone measured but laced with curiosity. Adam looked up, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "That's intentional," he replied, setting his spoon aside. "But you weren't looking for me, were you? You've been busy digging into Officer Hale's history." Maya stiffened slightly. "How do you know that?" Adam leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "Let's just say I have my ways. And you're not exactly subtle when you start poking around." Maya crossed her arms, a flicker of annoyance surfacing. "If you know so much, then you know why I'm doing it. Hale's a danger to this community. Someone has to stop him." Adam's lips twitched into a faint smile. "And you think you're that someone?" "Yes," Maya said firmly. "I have the resources, the platform, and the will to see this through." Adam studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You've got fire, I'll give you that. But taking down someone like Hale isn't just about exposing him. It's about exposing the system that protects him." Maya frowned. "I'm aware of that. But where do you come into this? Why did you intervene that night, and why are you here now?" Adam's gaze darkened slightly. He leaned forward, his voice low but resolute. "I intervened because I've seen too many people like Hale destroy lives without consequence. And I'm here now because I think you might actually stand a chance at changing something. But only if you're willing to do it the right way." Maya tilted her head, intrigued but cautious. "And what, exactly, is the right way?" Adam reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a small flash drive, sliding it across the table to her. "This," he said simply. Maya picked it up, turning it over in her fingers. "What's on it?" "Evidence," Adam replied. "Surveillance footage, internal reports, and whistleblower statements. It's enough to prove that Hale isn't just a rogue officer, he's part of a network of corruption that runs deep in the department." Maya's eyes widened. "How did you get this?" Adam smirked faintly. "Let's just say I have friends in low places. And before you ask, yes, it's legitimate. But releasing it is a gamble. If you don't handle it carefully, it could backfire." Maya placed the flash drive on the table, her mind racing. "Why give this to me? Why not take it to the media yourself?" "Because I'm not the face this fight needs," Adam said bluntly. "You are. You have the credibility, the influence, and the story that can make people pay attention. But more importantly, you have the courage to see it through." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of Adam's words hanging in the air. Maya felt a mixture of determination and trepidation. She had wanted to make a difference, but this was bigger than she had anticipated. "What's the catch?" she asked finally. Adam's expression softened slightly. "No catch. But there's a cost. Once you step into this, there's no turning back. People like Hale don't go down quietly, and the system will fight to protect itself. You'll be putting yourself, your career, and maybe even your life on the line." Maya exhaled deeply, her mind spinning. She had worked so hard to build her life, to escape the shadows of her past. Was she ready to risk it all for this? As if sensing her hesitation, Adam leaned forward again, his tone gentler. "You've already taken the first step, Maya. You stood up to him that night. The question is, are you willing to stand up to all of them?" Maya met his gaze, her resolve hardening. I've spent my entire life fighting battles I wasn't supposed to win. This one won't be any different. Adam nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Good. Then we have work to do. Over the next week, Maya immersed herself in the information Adam had given her. The flash drive contained a treasure trove of damning evidence, emails, video clips, and internal memos that painted a clear picture of corruption and abuse within the police department. She enlisted the help of her most trusted colleagues, carefully crafting a strategy to release the information in a way that couldn't be ignored. They decided on a multi-pronged approach, a series of exposés published through her company's platform, paired with strategic leaks to major media outlets. At the same time, Maya began reaching out to community leaders, activists, and legal experts, building a coalition of support. She knew she couldn't do this alone. The night before the first exposé was set to go live, Maya received another call from Adam. "Are you ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. "Good. Just remember, this is only the beginning. The real fight starts when the truth comes out." Maya hung up, her heart pounding. She knew Adam was right. The next day, the world would know the truth about Officer Hale and the system that enabled him. But what would come next was anyone's guess. The storm breaks. The morning dawned heavy with anticipation. Maya sat in her office, staring at the countdown on her computer screen. The first exposé was set to go live in less than an hour. Titled, "The Shield of Corruption, The Untouchable Officer," it was the culmination of sleepless nights, countless hours of research, and an unrelenting resolve to reveal the truth. Her assistant, Carmen, walked in with a steaming cup of tea and a cautious smile. "You're really doing this," she said, setting the cup on Maya's desk. Maya looked up, her expression a mixture of determination and nervous energy. "We're doing this. This isn't just about me. It's about every person Hale and others like him have hurt." Carmen nodded, her admiration evident. "You've got the whole team behind you, Maya. Whatever happens, we're in this together." Maya smiled faintly. It was a comforting thought, but she knew the weight of this decision rested squarely on her shoulders. At precisely 9 a.m., the exposé went live. Within minutes, the article began to spread like wildfire across social media platforms. The accompanying video, a compilation of damning footage from the flash drive, painted an undeniable picture of Officer Trent Hale's abuse of power. One clip showed Hale aggressively arresting a young black man for loitering, despite the man's repeated protests that he was waiting for his grandmother. Another showed him threatening a group of teenagers with his gun drawn, their only crime being that they were gathered on a public basketball court after dark. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The comment sections filled with outrage, support, and calls for accountability. News outlets picked up the story within hours, and #JusticeForTheSilenced began trending worldwide. Maya watched the events unfold from her office, her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. Calls from journalists, messages of support, and the inevitable threats all poured in. She had expected this, but the sheer magnitude of the response still caught her off guard. By midday, the police department released a statement. It was the standard boilerplate response, acknowledging the allegations, promising an internal investigation, and urging the public to remain calm. But Maya knew better. This wasn't a department genuinely seeking the truth, it was damage control. The storm had only just begun. That evening, as Maya drove home, she noticed a car following her. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, but when the vehicle made every turn she did, her nerves began to fray. She pulled into a well-lit gas station and stepped out, her heart pounding. The car parked a short distance away, and a man in plain clothes emerged. He was stocky, with a face hardened by years of unchecked authority. "Maya Bennett," he called out, his tone more threatening than questioning. Maya's instincts screamed at her to run, but she stood her ground. "Who's asking?" The man approached, his hands resting casually at his sides, but there was a menace in his posture. "You've been making a lot of noise. Powerful people don't like noise." "Then maybe those people shouldn't have so much to hide," Maya shot back, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The man smirked. "Careful, Miss Bennet. Some rocks are better left unturned." Before she could respond, the sound of another car pulling up broke the tension. Maya turned to see Adam stepping out of a black sedan, his expression unreadable but his presence instantly commanding. "Is there a problem here?" Adam asked, his voice calm but laced with warning. The man's smirk faltered, and he took a step back. "No problem," he muttered, retreating to his car. Within moments, he was gone. Maya exhaled, her hands trembling slightly. "How did you?" "I told you this would get messy," Adam interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "Are you all right?" Maya nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. "That was a warning, wasn't it?" "More like a test," Adam replied. "They wanted to see if they could scare you off. You passed." Maya shook her head, a mix of anger and disbelief. "This is bigger than I thought." "It always is," Adam said. "But you're not alone in this. Remember that." The next day, Maya's exposé dominated headlines. Civil rights organizations began calling for independent investigations into the police department, and protests erupted across the city. The community was galvanized, and Maya found herself at the center of a movement she hadn't anticipated. But the backlash was equally fierce. Anonymous threats flooded her inbox. Her company's website was targeted by hackers, temporarily shutting it down. And then there were the rumors, whispers of fabricated scandals meant to discredit her, spread by those desperate to silence her voice. Through it all, Maya remained resolute. She leaned on her team, her allies, and Adam, who had become an unexpected but invaluable partner in her fight. One evening, as she prepared for a live interview with a national news outlet, Maya received a call from an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Ms. Bennet," the voice on the other end said, low and gravelly. "This is Detective Sarah Calloway. I think we need to talk." "About what?" Maya asked, her guard immediately up. "About Hale," Calloway replied. "And the people protecting him. I have information, but I can't share it over the phone. Can you meet me?" Maya glanced at her watch. "When and where?" "Tonight. Midnight. There's a diner on the edge of town, Rusty's. Be careful. If anyone sees us, this conversation never happened." The line went dead, leaving Maya with more questions than answers. As she prepared to leave for the interview, her thoughts raced. Detective Calloway's call was a risk, but if she truly had information about Hale and the corruption within the department, it could be a game-changer. Maya glanced at her reflection in the mirror, her determination shining through the weariness. She had stepped into the storm willingly, and there was no turning back now. The edge of truth. Maya arrived at Rusty's diner just before midnight. The diner, a relic from a bygone era, sat abandoned on the outskirts of the city like a forgotten dream. Its flickering neon sign buzzed intermittently, casting an eerie glow on the empty parking lot. She parked her car a few spaces from the entrance and surveyed the area, instinctively checking for any signs of danger. Her mind was clouded with uncertainty. Detective Sarah Calloway's sudden appearance, an insider willing to provide more details about the web of corruption that entangled Officer Hale and the police department, had caught her off guard. What did she really know? And why the secrecy? Maya stepped out of the car, her boots crunching against the gravel as she made her way to the diner's front door. The cold night air bit at her skin, a reminder that the world she was stepping into wasn't just dangerous, it was suffocating. As she entered, the bell above the door chimed softly, and the scent of stale coffee and grease filled her nostrils. The diner was dimly lit, its countertops covered in remnants of unfinished meals. There was only one person inside, a waitress with a cigarette dangling from her mouth, her gaze distant as she wiped down the counter. Maya scanned the room, searching for Detective Calloway. A figure in the farthest booth raised a hand, signaling her to come over. It was a woman, mid-30s, dressed in a plain black jacket and dark jeans, with her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Despite her casual attire, there was a sharpness to her presence, an intensity that Maya recognized. This was someone who had seen too much, someone who had lived in the shadows long enough to know how to survive. "Ms. Bennett," Detective Calloway greeted, her voice low but firm. "Thanks for meeting me." Maya slid into the booth, her eyes searching the woman's face. Calloway seemed different from the kind of officers Maya had encountered before. She didn't carry the weight of authority like Hale, nor did she have the arrogance of someone untouchable. Instead, there was a quiet tension to her, a woman caught in a system she no longer trusted. "I'll be honest with you," Calloway began, glancing around as if checking for any eavesdroppers. "I don't know how long I'll be able to help you. The department's already watching me, and I've been in their crosshairs for a while now." "Why?" Maya asked. "What do you know?" Calloway took a deep breath, her eyes flickering toward the waitress, who was now giving them an inquisitive glance. "This isn't easy to explain, but I've seen firsthand how deep the corruption goes. Hale is just a small part of the larger picture. There's a network of officers, people in positions of power, who protect each other, no matter the cost. I've gathered evidence, but I'm stuck." Maya's mind raced as she processed the information. "Stuck? How?" "I'm not just fighting the department," Calloway continued, her voice tightening. "There are people outside the force, politicians, business owners, and even higher-ups in law enforcement, who are in on it. Hale. He's their enforcer, but he's not the mastermind. He's just the tool they use to maintain control." Maya's stomach churned. This was bigger than she had imagined. "So what's stopping you from bringing this to light?" Calloway leaned in closer, her eyes dark with concern. "I have the evidence, but it's fragile. If I release it, I'll be labeled as a traitor. No one will back me up. I'll be hunted. And there are people, powerful people, who won't hesitate to make me disappear if they feel threatened." Maya felt a rush of adrenaline, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. "You're telling me that there's a criminal enterprise embedded in the very heart of the city's law enforcement, and you're sitting on the evidence?" Calloway's gaze faltered, a flicker of shame crossing her face. "I know. I've hesitated because the cost is too high. But I can't live with myself knowing that nothing's being done. You're already making noise, Maya. Maybe it's time to stop waiting and start acting." Maya's hands clenched into fists on the table. The path she had chosen was leading her into dangerous waters, but this was the truth she had been seeking. This was the key to unraveling the web of lies that had ensnared so many lives. She leaned forward, locking eyes with the detective. "You're not alone in this. I'll help you expose it. But I need everything you have." Calloway hesitated, but then nodded. "I can't give it to you all at once. We'll have to be careful, methodical. If we're not, they'll crush us before we even get started." Maya nodded in agreement. "We do this right, or not at all." Over the following weeks, Maya and Detective Calloway worked in the shadows, carefully assembling a plan to bring the corruption to light. Calloway provided Maya with key pieces of evidence, a collection of encrypted files, audio recordings of covert meetings, and detailed accounts from several whistleblowers within the department. Each piece brought them closer to exposing the truth, but it also made the danger more tangible. The more Maya uncovered, the more she realized how far-reaching the network of corruption really was. There were elected officials on the take, local businesses that had been protected by the police, and a labyrinth of backroom deals that kept the system in place. Hale was just a small part of a much larger machine, a machine that relied on silence and fear to keep its secrets. But as they delved deeper, the walls seemed to close in around them. Maya's team began to receive anonymous threats, warnings to stop digging. And then came the accidents. Carmen's car was vandalized, tires slashed in the middle of the night. Maya's apartment was broken into, nothing stolen, but the message was clear: they were watching. Each new incident pushed Maya to the edge, but it also steeled her resolve. She couldn't back down now. She had come too far. One evening, as they were finalizing a batch of files to send to trusted journalists, Calloway met Maya in person with urgent news. "They know," she said, her face pale. "Someone in the department leaked that we're working together. They're going to make their move soon. We need to release the information before they can stop us." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What do we do?" "We have one shot," Calloway replied. "We go public tonight. We leak everything. I'll handle the secure transmission to the reporters. You just focus on getting the story out there." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones. This was it. The point of no return. At that moment, she understood what it meant to be a part of something larger than herself. This wasn't just about exposing one officer. This wasn't just about a fight for justice, it was about dismantling a system of power that had existed for far too long. Together, they would stand in the storm. And together, they would change the course of the city's future. Breaking the silence. The world seemed to hold its breath in the days leading up to the release. Maya spent every waking moment in her office, overseeing the final details, making sure every piece of evidence was airtight. She knew this was her moment, the culmination of everything she had worked for. The truth, at last, would see the light of day. But as the hours ticked down, the weight of it all pressed heavily on her chest. Maya paced back and forth, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had faced obstacles before, but nothing compared to the scale of what she was about to do. She had no illusions. There would be consequences. If the corruption within the police department didn't come for her, the people in power who had turned a blind eye to the system's abuse certainly would. She had already felt the sting of their threats. "Are you sure about this?" Carmen asked, standing in the doorway of the office. Her face was a mixture of concern and pride. Maya paused, her fingers hovering over her laptop keyboard. "I don't have a choice, Carmen. If I pull back now, nothing changes. People like Hale, people like the ones in charge, they'll keep ruining lives. We can't let that happen anymore." Carmen walked into the room, her eyes searching Maya's face. "I just want you to be safe. You're not alone in this, but I need you to be careful. There's too much at stake now." "I know," Maya replied, her voice soft but resolute. "But I can't stop. Not when so many others are depending on this. This isn't just about me anymore." The digital clock on Maya's desk flicked to 10 p.m., the final countdown. She had already sent the files to trusted journalists, but there was one last task before the truth would be made public. Her phone buzzed on the desk, the name Adam flashing across the screen. "Hey," Maya answered, grateful for the distraction. "You ready?" Adam's voice was calm, almost too calm. But Maya could hear the underlying tension, the urgency of the moment. "I think so," Maya replied, rubbing her forehead as if the pressure might be released in a simple gesture. "Everything's set on my end. It's just, this is it. Once we release the information, there's no turning back." "I know. And I'm ready for it. We've come too far to back down now." There was a pause, a shared understanding between them. Both had already made the commitment to see this through. "Stay safe, Maya," Adam added, his voice gentler than usual. "And remember, there are people on your side, more than you think." With that, they ended the call. Maya took a deep breath, then pressed the final button to release the story to the media. A click. A finality. The following hours were a blur. Within minutes, the exposé, a web of corruption, the hidden network behind Officer Trent Hale, exploded across social media, flooding news outlets, and lighting up conversations around the world. Maya sat back in her chair, a wave of exhaustion crashing over her. But there was no time to rest. The phone rang again. This time, it was Carmen, her voice shaky but firm. "You won't believe this," Carmen said. "The news is everywhere. People are calling for Hale's resignation, for an independent investigation into the entire department. But I've heard rumors, Maya. I think they're coming for you." Maya's stomach twisted. She had expected retaliation, but the weight of the threat suddenly felt real. "I know," Maya whispered. "I'm not naive. But I can't back down now. Don't be reckless. Get out of the city, just for a little while. Stay with your family or—" "No," Maya cut her off. "I can't hide, Carmen. Not now. I have to stay in the fight. The moment I leave, they win. This is bigger than me." Across town, the fallout from the exposé was taking shape in real time. The police chief, a seasoned veteran with years of experience, stood at a podium, his voice shaking as he addressed the growing controversy. He offered a weak condemnation of Officer Hale, but the damage was done. The public had already seen too much. The floodgates had opened. Hale had gone silent since the article's release. His name had become synonymous with scandal. But Maya knew that his silence was just the calm before the storm. If he was capable of the violence she'd witnessed, he wasn't the type to back down quietly. At 3 a.m., Maya finally allowed herself to rest, if only for a moment. Her phone buzzed incessantly, but she didn't have the strength to check it just then. She had managed to silence the fear that had been gnawing at her for months. This was happening. The world would change, one way or another. But then, her phone rang again. This time, the name Detective Calloway flashed on the screen. Maya hesitated before answering. "Maya, we have a problem," Calloway said, her voice urgent, almost panicked. "They're moving fast. Hale's lawyer is already pushing a narrative that you falsified the evidence, that it's all a smear campaign. The department's doing everything it can to discredit you before you can get any further." Maya's heart dropped. The stakes had just escalated. "I knew it wouldn't be easy, but they're making their move already," Maya said, her voice steady despite the unease gnawing at her. "I've gathered more intel. Hale is planning something big, and it's not just to save his career. He's going to come after you, Maya. Hard. You need to be prepared. Do you have proof?" Maya asked, her mind racing. Calloway was quiet for a beat. "Not yet. But it's coming. I'm working on getting something concrete to back up what I've said. In the meantime, I'm going to need your help. We need to make sure this doesn't just fade into another scandal. If we're going to take them down, we need to go public again, this time, with the bigger names involved." Maya swallowed hard, the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. "What do you need from me?" "Stay visible. Keep pushing. Keep speaking out. They can't silence you if you refuse to back down." "Understood," Maya said, her voice unwavering. The next morning, Maya was everywhere. Her face was on the front page of every major newspaper. She appeared on talk shows, radio stations, and online forums, telling her story, urging the public to demand justice. Her fight had become a rallying cry for others who had suffered under the weight of an unjust system, and she was determined to see it through. But the enemy was watching. Maya knew they were coming for her. Hale was no longer just an officer caught in a scandal. He was a man desperate to protect his legacy, his power, and his freedom. And he would stop at nothing to silence her. It was clear now. This fight wasn't just for the truth, it was for survival. And Maya Bennett wasn't about to let them take everything she had fought for. She had stepped into the storm, and she wasn't backing down.